Senator from Utah.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to address two elements of the Senate's process for evaluating judicial nominations: the role of the American Bar Association and the so-called blue slip courtesy. Each can influence the appointment process, and we must be diligent to ensure that neither is abused. The Eisenhower administration was the first to request the ABA's input on the American Bar Association's input on prospective judicial nominations. Speaking to the 1955 ABA convention, President Eisenhower thanked the ABA for helping him and his advisors to, quote, secure judges, unquote, of the kind he wanted to appoint. If that sounds like the ABA was a part of the administration, it was. The ABA evaluated individuals before they were even nominated. Individuals deemed not qualified by the ABA were almost never nominated. No other interest group was given such a quasi-official veto over nominations to any other office. What could justify such a special role for an interest group? What could do that? The theory is that the ABA was a non-political professional association concerned only with the legal profession and the practice of law. At his 1933 annual meeting in Grand Rapids, Michigan, for example, the ABA's executive committee considered changing the ABA constitution to allow, quote, discussion and expressions of opinion on questions of public interest, unquote. After arguments that this would revolutionize the scope and purpose of the FBA, no one, not one person, supported the amendment, to the best of my knowledge. In February 1965, ABA President Lewis Powell, later to serve on the Supreme Court, wrote that, quote, the prevailing view is that the association must follow a policy of non-involvement in political and emotionally controversial issues. If that view actually prevailed in 1985, it did not last. The ABA House of Delegates soon crossed the political Rubicon and began taking positions on a host of issues: federal arts funding, affirmative action, the death penalty, welfare policy, immigration, you name it. And the ABA has endorsed the liberal position, oftentimes the most liberal position. The ABA not only opines on such issues through regulations, but lobbies legislatures and files briefs in court cases. The ABA has done exactly what it chose not to do back in 1933 and revolutionized the scope and purpose of the organization. It abandoned nearly a century of non-involvement in political issues. The condition that was said to justify its special role in the judicial appointment process. It hardly seems reasonable that the ABA could somehow seal off its evaluation of judicial nominees from all of this political activism so that its conclusions could still be trusted. In 1987, several members of the ABA Evaluation Committee said that Judge Robert Bork was not qualified to serve on the Supreme Court. I said at the time that the ABA was, quote, playing politics with the ratings, unquote. 3 years later, several of us on the Judiciary Committee, including now Chairman Grassley, expressed the same view in a letter to Attorney General Richard Thornburgh. We wrote that the ABA, quote, can no longer claim the impartial, neutral role it has been given in the judicial selection process, unquote. This conclusion has been bolstered by academic research. In 2001, Professor James Lindgren of Northwestern University Law School published a study in the Journal of Law and Politics that examined ABA ratings for nominees of Presidents George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton. Controlling for race, gender, and a range of objective measurable credentials, Professor Lindgren found that Clinton nominees were 10 times more likely than Bush nominees to be rated well qualified by the ABA. In fact, he found that, quote, just being nominated by Clinton instead of Bush is better than any other credential or than all other credentials put together, unquote. Professor Lindgren concluded that, quote, the patterns revealed in the data are consistent with the conclusion of strong political bias favoring Clinton nominees, unquote. A decade later, 3 political scientists published a study in the Political Research Quarterly looking at ABA ratings for U.S. Court of Appeals nominees over a 30-year period. Applying recognized social science methods, they concluded that, quote, individuals nominated by a Democratic president are significantly more likely to receive higher ABA ratings than individuals nominated by a Republican president. We find strong evidence of systematic bias in favor of Democratic nominees, unquote. You don't say. President Trump recently nominated Stephen Grass to his U.S. Court of Appeals for the 8th Circuit. The distinguished senators from Nebraska have, in the Judiciary Committee and here on the Senate floor, detailed Mr. Grass's extensive experience and wide support throughout the legal community. He served as Chief Deputy Attorney General of Nebraska for nearly 12 years, during which time he defended the constitutionality of the state's law banning partial birth abortions. That might have been his most serious sin in the eyes of the ABA, which has aggressively embraced the abortion agenda for more than 4 decades. In 1989, the ABA formed a Committee on Overpopulation, which immediately launched a project on the law of abortion and endorsed the Uniform Abortion Act in 1972, even before the Supreme Court's now infamous Roe versus Wade decision, legalizing abortion on demand. The committee endorsed federal funding of abortion in 1978. And in 1990, by more than 2-1, they opposed any requirement of parental notification before abortions are performed on minors. The ABA, again, fully embraced the abortion agenda in 1992 and never looked back. It's no wonder that they would deem someone like Mr. Grass not qualified for the bench. President Trump has also nominated Brett Talley to the Federal District Court in Alabama. Talley attended Harvard Law School. He spent years in a previous clerkship at the federal appellate and trial court levels. He has worked here in the Senate. He has served as the Deputy Solicitor General of the state of Alabama. He has served in the Justice Department, most recently as Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Office of Legal Policy. He enjoys the support of both of Alabama's home state senators and has a sterling reputation in the legal community. Yet he, too, has been deemed not qualified by the ABA. How is that possible? That determination is nakedly political and should not be taken seriously. The ABA wants to find its purpose in terms of the legal profession and the practice of law. It has, however, chosen a different path. By doing so, the ABA has not only abandoned what once might have justified its role in judicial selection, but has also cast serious doubt on the credibility and integrity of its judicial nominee ratings. The ABA was, of course, free to do so, but it should not expect that its actions have no consequences. The other element of the judicial confirmation process that I want to address is the so-called blue slip courtesy. This is an informal practice begun in 1917 by which the Judiciary Committee chairman seeks the views of senators regarding nominees who would serve in their states. This practice really only gets noticed when the president and Senate majority are of the same party. In that situation like we face today, the question is whether a home state senator can use the blue slip courtesy to block any Senate consideration and therefore effectively veto a president's nominees. Since the blue slip courtesy was established, 19 senators, including myself, have chaired the Judiciary Committee, 10 Democrats and 9 Republicans. Only 2 of those 19 chairmen treated the blue slip courtesy as a single senator veto. One of them apparently to empower Southern segregationist senators to block judges who might support integration. The other 17 chairmen fall into 2 categories. The early chairman allowed objecting home state senators to present their views in the nominee's confirmation hearing. In the last few decades, chairmen of both parties have said that a negative blue slip will not veto a nominee if the White House consulted in good faith with the home state senators. That's the approach that Chairman Joe Biden took, and that I continued when I was chairman, each of us under presidents of both parties. The blue slip courtesy, then, has been a way to highlight the views of home state senators and to encourage the White House to consult with them when choosing judicial nominees. And it works. When chairmen of both parties have chosen only a handful of times to proceed with a hearing for a nominee who lacked 2 positive blue slips, their decision was consistent with this approach. Today, Democrats want to rewrite the history of blue slips and redefine the very purpose of the courtesy behind the process. They want to weaponize the blue slip so that a single senator can at any time and for any reason prevent Senate consideration of judicial nominees. They want to change the traditional use of the blue slip because they can no longer use the filibuster to defeat judicial nominees who have majority support. Democrats opposed filibustering judicial nominees during the Clinton administration. Then in just 16 months during the 108th Congress, Democrats conducted 20 filibusters of judicial nominees by President George W. Bush. These were the first filibusters, judicial filibusters in history to defeat a majority-supported majority-supported judicial nominees. The filibuster pace dropped by 2/3 under President Obama, when Republicans conducted just 7 filibusters in 30 months. Claiming that declining filibusters were nonetheless a crisis, Democrats in 2013 abolished nomination filibusters for all executive and judicial nominations, except for the Supreme Court. Democrats took away the ability of 41 senators to block consideration of judicial nominations on the Senate floor. But now they demand that a single senator have that much power in the Judiciary Committee by turning the blue slip courtesy into a de facto filibuster. Like the ABA's rating of nominees, nothing but politics explains this flip-flopping and manipulation of the confirmation process. In October 31st, I addressed this issue here on the Senate floor and suggested that the history and purpose of the blue slip courtesy could help guide its application today. I still believe that. The views of home state senators matter, and the White House should sincerely consult with them before making nominations to positions in their states. Home state senators enjoy countless ways to convey their views to colleagues here in the Senate, and every senator may decide whether or how to consider those views. But in the end, the blue slip is a courtesy, not an absolute veto. This distinction matters because the Judiciary Committee will tomorrow hold a hearing on a nominee to the U.S. Court of Appeals from a state with 2 Democratic senators. One has returned the blue slip, the other has not. Chairman Grassley's decision to hold a hearing is completely consistent with the history and purpose of the blue slip courtesy. Democrats falsely claim that Chairman Grassley is eliminating what they say is a long-standing precedent that home state senators may automatically veto appeals court nominations. No such precedent exists or ever has, unless the practice of only 2 chairmen for only a fraction of the last century constitutes controlling precedent. and we all know it shouldn't. It is beyond hypocritical for Democrats to pretend that they actually care about the confirmation process precedent. They began the practice of forcing time-consuming roll call votes for nominees with no opposition at all. They began the practice of using the filibuster to defeat majority-supported nominees. They began the practice of forcing the president to renominate individuals multiple times. They began the practice of forcing cloture votes on unanimously supported judicial nominees and then delaying a confirmation vote for days. These weren't actions undertaken by Republicans. There is one side and one side only that has continuously pushed this envelope. Democrats cite a 2009 letter to President Obama from the Republican conference and an op-ed I published in 2014 defending the blue slip courtesy. In each situation, the Democratic majority was actually threatened to abolish the blue slip policy altogether. In my op-ed, I emphasized that the blue slip courtesy is intended to encourage consultation by the White House with home state senators. When he became chairman in 2015, Senator Grassley explained the blue slip process to his constituents in a Des Moines Register op-ed. He wrote that the process has value, that he intended to honor it. He is doing just that by returning to the real history and purpose of the blue slip courtesy. My Democratic colleagues seem to think that the confirmation process should be whatever they want it to be, at whatever moment they so choose. Now they demand that, contrary to most of the last century, a simple senator should be able to do informally what 41 senators can no longer do formally. They demand, following precedent that does not exist, while creating new obstruction precedents of their own. Democrats have forced the Senate to take 60 cloture votes on nominations so far this year, 13 of them on judicial nominations. That is nearly 9 times as many as during the first year of all new presidents. All new presidents, since the cloture rule was applied to nominations in 1949. I've been in the minority a number of times, multiple times. I get it. Democrats want their way, and they don't always get it. That hardly means that the majority in general, and Chairman Grassley in particular, are not being fair, consistent, or even-handed. The blue slip courtesy has a history, and it has a purpose. It exists to allow home state senators to share their views with the Judiciary Committee and to encourage the White House consultation to consult with them before making nominations. Neither a liberal interest group like the American Bar Association nor abuse of the blue slip courtesy should be allowed to further distort and politicize the judicial confirmation process. It's a disgrace. It really is a disgrace, the way the Democrats changed the rules automatically overnight without even consulting with Republicans and doing it solely to give advantage to their side, even though this is a process that really ought to have fair treatment on both sides at all times.